example, this week we're going to take the past continuous. It's actually very easy. Now let's start together. Now here let's see what's happening in front of us. As you can see, this is a village. A lot of people are doing many different actions. Okay, so it was 9 o'clock in the morning. Everybody in the town was doing their own work, but suddenly okay, so as you can see, a car crashed. So a car crashed into a tree. Okay. Everybody shared this news with other people. They said, when the accident happened, so now this accident is something that happened in the past. It happened and finished in the past, right? But at the time of the accident, at its certain time, okay, I was doing my homework. Oh, another one said, I was playing my guitar. We were having a great party. I was looking around. Okay. I was repairing my car or fixing my car. I was waiting for my friend and reading the newspaper. I was working in my office. I was mending the roof or fixing the roof. We were learning English. I was playing my flute. I was making a phone call. Now, as you have noticed, the past continuous is something that happened in the past and finished in the past, but it happened at a certain time. So all of these actions that we just saw, they happened at the certain time of the accident, right? So they happened at a certain time in the past. So I use the past continuous to describe actions that happened at a certain time in the past. For example, what was he doing yesterday at 7:30 a.m.? So here I have a certain time. He was having breakfast. Okay, so I use the past continuous. Now, what were you doing yesterday at 7:30 a.m.? Okay, what was he doing yesterday at noon? So again, this is a certain time. Also, if you say all morning, all afternoon, okay, the keyword all. So what was he doing yesterday at noon? He was playing football at school. Was playing, the past continuous. What was he doing yesterday at 4 p.m.? Again, a certain time in the past. He was doing his homework. Was she watching TV yesterday at midnight? Yesterday at midnight, so again a certain time in the past. No, she wasn't. Okay, she was sleeping. So again I use the past continuous. Was she having dinner yesterday at 9 p.m.? Yes, she was. Okay, so I use the past continuous when I want to describe a action that happened in the past but happened in a or at a certain time. Okay, was she watching TV yesterday at midnight? No, she wasn't. She was sleeping. Okay, yes, I think we said this. Fine. What were you doing yesterday while your mother or father was cooking? Okay, so now can you tell us what were you doing? So this happened at a certain time in the past when your mother or father was cooking or cooked. Now, and when do I use the past continuous, like we said, to describe an action that happened at a certain time in the past? For example, my dad was having lunch yesterday at 7 o'clock. Okay, also I can use it to describe scenes in a story, or for example, the princess was braiding her hair or combing her hair when she heard the prince calling, for example. Okay, so I can use the past continuous to describe scenes in a story. It's fine, but mainly I use it for an action that happened at a certain time in the past. Now I can also use the past continuous for two actions that were happening together at the same time. Okay, so how do I use it then? I use it with when and while. Okay, so if I want to talk about two actions happening at the same time in the past, I use when and while with the past continuous. For example, I was sleeping when the teacher finished the lesson. So the first action here is I was sleeping, and the second action is the teacher finished the lesson. So these two actions happened at the same time in the past. Okay, he was snoring while she was watching a movie. Now, he was snoring is the first action. She was watching a movie is the second action. Both of those actions happened at the same time in the past. Now, what is the difference between when and while? When do I use when and when do I use while? Now, if you open your booklets, I think it's page 26. Yes, page 26. Now we said we use when and while when we talk about two actions that were happening at the same time in the past. But when do I use when? I use when if one action is long and the other is short, or when one action interrupts the other. Okay, so I use it when one action interrupts the other. One is a short action and one is a long action. For example, here the alarm bell rang, he was sleeping. Now those are two actions. Now where is the long action here? It's he was sleeping, right? This is a long action, it takes time. Now where's the short action here? It's the alarm bell rang. This is the short action, it doesn't take time to happen at all. So here, this short action, the alarm bell rang, what did it do? It interrupted this long action. Okay, so if this short action interrupts the long action, I use when. So it's going to be he was sleeping when the alarm bell rang, or when the alarm bell rang, he was sleeping. So I put when always before the short interrupting action. Or to make it even easier, I put when always before the past simple. Do you see this? This verb is in the past simple tense, right? So the short action always happens in the past simple tense. So I use when before the past simple tense. Okay? So we said again, I use when I'm describing two actions. One is a short one that interrupts the other long action, and I put when before the short action. He was sleeping when the alarm bell rang, or when the alarm bell rang, he was sleeping. So here, where is the short action? We said the short action is the alarm bell rang. So I put when before this action. And to make it even easier for me, when comes before the past simple. Okay, the short action always comes in the past simple tense. So I put when before the past simple. Fine. Now, when do I use while? So I usually use while when there are two long actions with no interruption. Okay? Or if I have one long action interrupted by the other short one, like we said here. The long action yes, usually comes after while. Okay, so while, again, we use it when I'm talking about two long actions with no interruption. There are two long actions, they do not interrupt each other, or one long action that is interrupted by another short one. Let's see what I'm talking about. For example, it was raining, I was watching a movie. Okay, so the first action, it was raining. The second one is I was watching a movie. So these are both two long actions, right? They are both long. Do they interrupt each other? No. It was raining outside and I was watching a movie. So how am I going to use while here? Yes, while I was watching a movie, it was raining. So I put while before the any long action. These are both long actions, so, and they do not interrupt each other. I can also say while it was raining, I was watching a movie. Okay? Now, here we said also that I use while if I have a long action interrupted by a short one. For example, here, it started to rain while we were playing in the garden. So it started to rain, this is a short action, right? And we were playing in the garden, this is a long action. So I use while before the long action that was interrupted by this short action. Okay, so while always comes before the long action. To make it even easier for myself, while always comes before the past continuous. Okay, while always comes before the past continuous. Fine. So like we said here, I use when I'm talking about one short action and one long action, and the short action interrupts the long action. Okay, he was sleeping when the alarm bell rang. So the alarm bell rang here, this is the short action, it interrupted the long action, he was sleeping. To make it easier for myself also, when always comes before the past simple, and the past simple means it's a short action. So when always comes before the past simple. Now, when do I use while? I use while if there are two long actions that do not interrupt each other. They are both happening at the same time without interrupting each other, or if I have a long action that was interrupted by a short one. For example, here, while I was watching a movie, it was raining. These are both long actions. They do not interrupt each other, so I use while with them. Now, it started to rain while we were playing in the garden. Now here I have a long action. We were playing in the garden and it was interrupted by the short action. It started to rain. So I use while before the long action. While always comes before the long action to make it easier for myself. Even so, while always comes before the past continuous. Okay? While always comes before the past continuous. So here, for example, let us return back to the presentation. I was sleeping when the teacher finished the lesson. So here I have two actions happening at the same time. One is long and one is short, right? I was sleeping, this is the long action. The teacher finished the lesson, this is the short action, and interrupted the long action. So I use when. I was sleeping when the teacher finished the lesson. Now, he was snoring while she was watching a movie. So here I have two actions happening at the same time. They are both long actions. He was snoring and she was watching a movie. And they did not they do not interrupt each other at all. So I use while with them. He was snoring while she was watching a movie. Okay? Now, how do I form the past continuous itself? The form of it. Now, in the affirmative, I mean it's not a negative and not a question. It's the normal form. So here with I use was and I add ing to my verb. For example, I was watching. With you, I use were and I add ing to my verb. So I cannot form the past continuous without verb to be in the past, was or were, plus my verb, plus ing. I do not forget the ing, and I do not forget was or were. I cannot form the past continuous without those two. Okay, so in the past continuous, I use was or were plus my verb plus ing. So I was watching, you were watching, he was watching, she was watching, it was watching, we were watching, you were watching. This is the you plural. They were watching. Okay, so with I, he, she, and it, I use was plus the verb plus ing. With you, we, and they, I use were plus the verb plus ing. Okay, now how do I form the negative of the past continuous? Simply I add not between the was or were and the verb. I wasn't watching or was not watching. Okay, you were not watching or weren't. Okay, so how do I form the negative? I simply add not after was or were and before my verb. I wasn't watching, you weren't watching, he wasn't watching, she wasn't watching, it wasn't watching, we weren't watching, you weren't watching, they weren't watching. Okay, so the negative is very easy. You just add not after was or were. Now, how do I form the question or in the interrogative form? Now, with I put in the beginning was. I just switch the subject and the verb, and of course I never forget that question mark because it's not a question without that question mark. So, was I watching? Were you watching? Okay, if I want to answer those questions, I will say yes, I was. Yes, you were. Or no, I wasn't. No, you weren't. Okay? Was he watching? Was she watching? Was it watching? So if I want to answer those questions, I will say yes, he or she or it was. No, he or she or she or it wasn't. Okay? Now, were we watching? Were you watching? Were they watching? So yes, we, you, and they were. Okay, if I want to answer those questions. Or no, we, you, they weren't. Okay, So in the question form or in the interrogative form, I simply just switch between the subject and the verb. I put was before I and he and she and it, plus the subject plus my verb and ing, and of course I never forget the question mark. Was I watching? Was he watching? Was she watching? Was it watching? And if it's you or we or they, I put were before you or we or they, plus the subject itself, plus the verb, plus ing, and of course I do not forget that question mark. Were you watching? Were we watching? Were they watching? Okay. Now let us solve an exercise together. So when, I, the door, they, talking. Now here I have when. So when, if you remember, comes before a short action, and my short action should be in the past simple form, okay, or the past simple tense. So when I opened the door, now I have two verbs here, open and stop. So when I opened the door, they stopped talking. Okay, so those are both are short actions happening in the past. Okay, so when I opened the door, they stopped talking. So I use when with the short actions, and the short actions come in the past simple tense. Okay, now she in a shop when I lost her. I have work and see. Now here I have what? A long action, and here I have a short action, and I put when before the short action, so the short action comes in the past simple tense. So she was working in a shop, so this is the long action, so it comes in the past continuous. She was working in a shop when I last saw her. Okay, she was working in a shop, this is the long action. When I last saw her, this is the short action, so I use here the past simple, and this is the long action, I use the past continuous. Of course when always comes before the short action. Okay, now when you I have dinner, so this is a question. I have arrived and she make. Now when you arrived, was she making dinner? So here when also, as we said, always comes before the short action, and it's always in the past simple tense. So when you arrived, was she making dinner? Now why was she making? Because it's a question here. Okay, so and this is a long action. Was she making dinner is a long action, but because I have a question mark, it's a question. So when you arrived, was she making dinner? Now what when the alarm clock off? And I have you do, and I have go, and again this is a question. So what were you doing, okay, when the alarm clock went off? So here this is the long action, so this is the past continuous form, and the alarm clock went off, this is the short action, so it's in the past simple form, and when like we said always comes before the short action. Okay, now while I in a cafe, my mobile something. I have sit and ring. So while I was sitting in a cafe, my mobile rang. So here I have while. While, like we said, always comes before a long action, and the long action always comes in the past continuous form. So while I was sitting in a cafe, my mobile phone rang. So here rang is a short action that interrupts this long action. So it has to be, if it's a short action, it has to be in the past simple tense. Okay, now while Tom, Alice, something. So while Tom was reading, Alice was painting. Now again, I used while here because I have two long actions that do not interrupt each other. So while Tom was reading, Alice was painting. So both are going to be in the past continuous. Two long actions not interrupting each other. Now, it to rain while John something. So it started to rain while John was fishing. So here I have a short action and it interrupted the long action. So it started, short action, so the past simple tense, to rain while John was fishing. Was fishing is the long action, so the past continuous tense. And of course we know while always comes before the long action or always comes before the past continuous tense. So they went, suddenly the music something. So they, and I have dance and stop. So they were dancing. So this is a long action. When suddenly the music stopped. So this is the short action that interrupted this long action. So I use when before the short action, and the short action always comes in the past simple tense. Now, if you know Tintin was very famous, like a comic book. It's an old famous comic book. It's actually very, very nice, and it has a lot of nice adventures. Now, here we are going to see actions, if they are long, short, and what do I use with them, when or while. So while Captain Haddock walk down the stairs, he fall. Now here I have to change the verb according to when or while. So like we said, while comes before the long action and it's interrupted by a short action here. So the long action always comes in the past continuous form and the short action comes in the past simple form. Okay, so it's going to be while Captain Haddock was walking down the stairs, he fell. Okay, now Tintin hike when he see the Yeti. A Yeti is like a snow monster. Okay, so Tintin and something when he see the Yeti. So here we have a long action. Hiking takes time, right? So this is a long action, and here see, this is a short action. So, and I have when here. So the long action comes in the past continuous form and the short action comes in the past simple form. So when, or Tintin was hiking when he saw the Yeti. Okay, now while Tintin and Snowy have sailed, they discover the Black Island. Okay, so again, while comes before the long action. The long action always comes in the past continuous tense, and I have here a short action, and the short action, like we said, comes always in the past simple tense. So while Tintin and Snowy were sailing, they discovered the Black Island. Now Thomas run when he be, verb to be, hit in the face. So here I have the long action and here I have the short action. Long action, past continuous. Short action, past simple. And I have also when. When comes before the past simple always. So Thompson was running when he was hit in the face. Okay, as they read Tintin and Snowy be surprised. So again, this is a long action, this is a short action, and the long action, past continuous, short action, past simple. So as they were reading, surprised is a long action also. So these are both, yes, these are both long actions that do not interrupt each other. So as they were reading, Tintin and Snowy were surprised. Okay, so again, I'm sorry, these are two long actions, they do not interrupt each other, so I use the past continuous with them. Okay, I use the past continuous for long actions. So they were, as they were reading, Tintin and Snowy were surprised. Okay, now Nestor clean when somebody ring the bell. So here I have the long action, cleaning, right? It takes a long time. And here ring the bell, so this is the short action, and when comes before the short action. So the long action has to be in the past continuous, the short action has to be in the past simple. So Nestor was cleaning when somebody rang the bell. Okay, now Tintin and Haddock ride camels when they hear gunshots. So again, the long action here, and I have a short action interrupting it. Long action means the past continuous, short action is the past simple, and when comes always before the short action. So Tintin and Haddock were riding camels when they heard gunshots. Now, as Bianca Castafiore sing, a glass break. So here also I have a long action and a short action. Long action, past continuous, short action, past simple. So as Bianca Castafiore was singing, a glass broke. Okay, while Professor Calculus roller skate, he slipped. So while here I have the long action, roller skating, so this is a long action, it was interrupted by the short action of slipping, and while always comes before the long action. Long action means past continuous, and short action means past simple. So while Professor Calculus was roller skating, he slipped. Okay, now this was it for the past continuous. It's very easy. As a quick recap, I used the past continuous for something that happened in the past but at a certain time. Okay, and I use the past continuous also to describe two actions happening together at the same time in the past. But if I have one short action and one short action, interrupting one long action, I use with it when. Okay, and if I have two long actions not interrupting one another, I use while, and when always comes before the short action. The short action is always in the past simple tense. So when always comes before the past simple, and while always comes before the long action, and the long action is always in the past continuous tense. So while always comes before the past continuous. Now I want you to read this lesson from your booklet again. Solve the exercises in your booklet, and of course you can check them using the model answer that you have. Either you took it from school or it was uploaded on the school application. Now thank you so much, and see you next time.